for the word today? Well, I'm ready to share the word with you. Turn with me to Genesis chapter 6. The 6th chapter of the book of Genesis. And I will be reading from the NLT. You can follow on the wall behind me. The words will be there. And I'm going to begin my reading in verse 1. Genesis 6, verse 1. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, and for some time after, giants and Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race. I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth except Noah was corrupt. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. Along with the earth. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. Look, I am about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth would die, but I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animals and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. So now you see how the animals got in the boat. God said they will come to you. Noah did not have to round them up. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and for all the animals. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Father, I thank you today for your word. Thank you for this time, for this church, for this people. Now, Lord, in these next few moments, I pray you bless the speaking of your word. Holy Spirit, I yield my members to you, sir. Come and have your way this day. Speak to our hearts. Help us to understand the character and principles of God, and help us, Lord God, to apply them to our lives. Lord, I pray that every ear is an ear to hear what the Spirit of the Lord has to say. I pray that you'd hide me behind your word, God. The man is not seen, but the word of God is heard in this house today. Holy Spirit, have your way. Come now. Bless our Lord and our Savior, and bless our Heavenly Father. Through this word, I pray. In Jesus' mighty name. And all that agree said, Amen. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, sir. Well, today we're starting a new series. We just finished the series, Patterns of a Jesus Follower, and today we're starting a series on the patterns of God. And in this series, we're going to look at Old Testament stories that has New Testament application. Because God is a sovereign God. Some of you may struggle with the notion of seeing God or understanding God through patterns. And I get it. But as we look at how God moved in the lives of man across many generations, I believe we'll discover that though his acts in one generation may have differed from his acts in another, God's character and his principles remain the same. One principle we find consistently throughout the Old Testament is God making covenants. Everyone say he's a covenant-making God. He's a covenant-making God. And the preferred word, or the preferred meaning of the word covenant in the Old Testament is the word bond. So a covenant refers to two or more parties being bound together, or being in agreement. In today's message, Sign of the Rainbow, we're going to see that God not only made this particular covenant with man, but also with the animals. And the central figure of this message is Noah, who of course was the builder of the ark. We're going to talk about what led to the building of this very large boat. We're going to talk about what God said in the aftermath of the great flood. And we're going to see what the rainbow means to us today. Sign of the rainbow. Genesis chapter 6 describes what can only be characterized as a world gone wrong. In the beginning, God created the world and everything in it, and he called it good. And things remained in a state of goodness until sin entered in. And in Genesis 6, sin reaches a new peak. For God saw the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. He observed that everyone on earth had become corrupt except one man, Noah. Noah was a righteous man, and the Bible says he was the only blameless person on earth. One character of God and one consistency you find with the Lord is that he always communicates with the righteous. Amen. Amen. Is God communicating with you? And I won't dig no deeper than that. I think I've unearthed enough. But God communicates with the righteous. Even when it comes to something big like this, something great he's about to do. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah, God communicated with his friend Abraham. He communicates with the righteous. So he tells Noah, I've decided, Noah, to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out. The wickedness of man led to God taking actions that destroyed all but a few of every living thing on earth, including the animals. Because of the sins of man, God said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Because of the widespread corruption, God said, yes, I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. God's words I am sorry I ever made them, do not mean he regretted forming humanity. God was not admitting that he'd made a mistake in creating us. God was expressing sorrow for what people had done and were doing to themselves. He was sorry that people chose sin and death over a relationship with him. Too many people today buy into the notion that living a life of sin is okay. And it is our responsibility to tell them that it's not okay. It is our responsibility to tell them. It is my responsibility to tell you that sin kills. Amen. Sin brings death. Sin separates you from God. Sin will suck you up, use you up, and then spit you out. So don't give into it. As I was working on this word, I believe the Lord revealed two things to me about why people are so easily caught up in sin. I want you to hear this. Number one, people sin out of confusion. And number two, people sin for convenience. Confusion and convenience. Sexual sins especially are often built upon those two things, that come out of those two things, confusion and convenience. It was sexual sin which led to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it was prevalent in the days of Noah. If you don't understand that you were created in the image of God, that you are spirit first and then flesh, your flesh can create for you a confusing life. And if you do not keep your flesh under subjection to convenience your flesh, you give into sin. The evil generation of Noah made the Lord sorry he'd even created the animals. Think about that. Why was God sorry he created the animals? He was sorry because the actions he was about to take against man, who had become exceedingly wicked, would lead to the destruction of the innocent animals. That shows the power of sin in the eyes of God. Now don't start screaming in your seat. I know the church doesn't preach a lot about sin.
Come on, Pastor. Come on, Pastor.
We don't want to offend anyone. But I hope you'd rather be offended than live a life of separation from God, or enter into an eternity that has no God in it. But this shows the power of sin in the eyes of God. Sin has the potential to bring death and destruction even on the innocent. You gotta get this. Even on the innocent. So please hear me when I say, do not think that your sin will not hurt others, because it will. That is why God hates it. Sin's poison cannot be contained. Its desires become contagious, and its effects will bring death in some way to all associated with it. So do not think your sin will not harm your children, because it will. You may think it's okay to sit in front of your computer or your iPad or your phone or your television, gazing with lustful eyes at people you don't know. But it's not okay, because your actions are releasing the spirit of sin into your household. We are the keepers of the gate. We see in the story of Noah that even the innocent was affected by the evil corruption of man, including the animals. That is why Paul wrote in Romans 8:19 and 20, all creation is eagerly waiting for that future day when God will reveal his children. For against its will, all of creation was subjected to God's curse. And because of the effects of sin, the effects that sin has on life, the way sin corrupts everything, God shortened the lifespan of man. He said in Genesis 6:3, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. Listen to this. Before the flood, Adam lived 930 years. Enosh lived 905 years. Enoch was translated, so he only lived on earth for 365 years. Methuselah lived for 969 years. And I know some of you think, well, Pastor, that's not real years. Don't fool yourself. It's real years. And because what you find throughout the Bible is that because of the evil and wickedness and corruption of man, God would not allow man to live the years that we used to. Noah's lifespan, a lifetime, was 950 years. 600 years before the flood and 350 years after the flood. After the flood, Noah's son Shem lived to be 600 years old. After the flood, Eber lived for 464 years, Abraham for 175. You see the steady decline. Jacob for 147, and Joseph for 110. You see what sin did. Because of man's corruption, the number of years we live on earth steadily decline. And we find in Psalms 90 verse 10, it says that the days of our lives are 70 years. And if by reason of strength, they're 80. The Bible mentions Noah's age in Genesis 5:32 to be 500 years old. In Genesis 6, it gives the account of God telling Noah of his plan to destroy the earth. And in Genesis 7, verse 8 says that Noah was 600 years old when the flood covered the earth. So we have a span of 100 years from the time God told Noah to build the boat until the flood. 100 years. Can you imagine what that wicked generation thought about Noah as he was building that big old boat? Can you imagine their jeers and their ridicule? Listen, their jeers and ridicule should not surprise us, because sin always wants to mock righteousness. Do not be surprised, because sin always wants to mock righteousness. We've got to be like Noah and keep our focus on the task at hand. So don't shrink back or fall away when sinners challenge what you believe. Do not hide or become fearful when people challenge your faith. Stand firm on what you believe God has said or what you know God is doing, even if those around you think you are mad or crazy. Stand firm. Stand firm on what you believe God has said. Stand firm on what you know God is doing, even when people around you will call you crazy. For did not even the family of Jesus think he was mad or beside himself? Did not the Pharisees and Sadducees suggest that Jesus had a devil? We find in Mark 3, verses 20 and 22, it says, one time Jesus entered a house. Now listen to this. Listen to this. Jesus entered a house, and the crowds began to gather again. Soon he and his disciples couldn't even find time to eat. When his family heard what was happening, they tried to take him away. He's out of his mind, they said. But the teachers of the religious law who had arrived from Jerusalem said, he's possessed by Satan, the prince of demons. That is where he gets the power to cast out demons. Can you imagine that? Jesus being called crazy, out of his mind by his family, and demon possessed by the teachers of the religious law because, listen to me, he was so given to the works of God that eating or satisfying his flesh became an afterthought. It became an afterthought. He didn't even think about it. You remember when he was meeting with the woman at the well and the disciples came back and they asked, well, Lord, who gave you food? He said, I have food to eat that you know not of. For my food is to do the will of God and to glorify him who sent me. Oh, how I wish the church was filled with like-minded men and women today. People who are so passionate about God, about spreading the gospel, that food becomes a mere means of survival. But the truth is, church, most people don't eat to live. They live to eat. Most people don't eat to live, they live to eat. Their mind is continually given to what am I going to eat next? Lord, help us. Listen, I have that same problem. Oh, Jesus, y'all got to pray for me. Listen, we got to get rid of this mindset. That's a mind of the flesh instead of a mind of Christ. Jesus wasn't concerned about food. And because he was so given to the works of God, his family thought he was mad. And the religious leader said, oh, he has a demon. He has a devil. The prince of the devil is in him. Why? Because food was an afterthought. When Noah was 600 years old, on the 17th day of the second month, it says all the underground waters. Now listen to this. So we think of the rain coming from the sky, but that wasn't what God did. It says all the underground waters erupted from the earth, and the rain fell in mighty torrents from the sky. The rain continued to fall for 40 days and 40 nights. Then in verses 17 through 24 of Genesis 7, it says, "In 40 days the flood waters grew deeper, covering the ground and lifting the boat high above the earth. As the waters rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. Finally, the water covered even the highest mountains on earth, rising more than 22 feet above the highest peaks. All the living things on earth died. Birds, domestic animals, wild animals, small animals that scurry along the ground, and all people. Everything that breathed and lived on dry land died. God wiped out every living thing on the earth, people, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and the birds of the sky. They all were destroyed. The only people who survived were Noah and those with him in the boat. The only animals that survived were the ones that was in the boat with Noah. And the flood waters covered the earth for 150 days. But how many of you know that God's a God of hope? He's even in the midst of what looks like devastation and destruction, he's a God of hope. And we find that hope in Genesis 8, verse 1. It says, "But God remembered Noah." He remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock with him in the boat. This verse expresses precisely the faithfulness of God. We cannot talk about the character of God and not mention that he is faithful. God remembered Noah and the animals, and he sent a wind to blow across the earth, and the flood waters began to recede. The underground waters forced out of the earth, stopped flowing. And the torrential rains from the sky stopped falling. After 150 days, exactly 5 months from the time the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountain of Ararat. 2.5 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks became visible. We found in Genesis 8, verses 13 to 21, that when Noah was 601 years old, 10.5 months after the flood began, the flood waters had almost dried up from the earth. Noah lifted back the covering of the boat and saw that the surface of the ground was drying, but it wasn't completely dry. So 2 more months went by, and at last the earth was dry. Then God said to Noah, "Leave the boat, all of you, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Release all the animals, the birds, the livestock, and the small animals that scurry along the ground so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth." So Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives left the boat, and all the large and small animals and birds came out of the boat pair by pair. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. We got to be an altar building people. An altar is the place of sacrifice. An altar is the place of prayer. An altar is the place of worship. We've got to be an altar building people, because when you build an altar unto the Lord, God honors you. Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offerings the animals and birds approved for that purpose. And the Lord was pleased with the aroma of the sacrifice and said to himself, I want you to see that. God said to himself, "I will never again curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent towards evil from childhood." Remember Adam and Eve when they sinned against God? The Lord said in Genesis 3, 17 through 19, he said, "Cursed is," this is what God told Adam. "Adam, cursed is the ground because of you." Because of your sin, Adam, the ground is cursed. Through painful toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your brow. But here in Genesis chapter 8, God promises to never again curse the ground because of the human race. He said to himself, I will never again destroy all living things. But as long as the earth remains, there will be planting and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night. And in Genesis 9, God confirms this covenant with his creation. In verses 8 through 17, we find these words. Then God told Noah and his sons, I hereby confirm my covenant with you and your descendants and with all the animals. You see, God just didn't make a covenant with man. He made a covenant with the animals. He also made a covenant with the ground, with the earth. He said, never again will I curse you because of man. Man is evil, and man always will be evil. But you're not going to have to pay for it. Because I'm going to hold man accountable for his own evil doings. No longer will I curse the ground. No longer will I curse the animals because of the evil wickedness of man. He made this covenant. He confirmed this covenant with Noah, his descendants, us, and with all the animals that were on the boat with Noah, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, every living creature. He said, never again will a flood destroy the earth. And God said, I'm giving you a sign of my covenant with you and with all living creatures for all generations to come. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. It is a sign of my covenant with you and with all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant with you and with all living creatures. Never again will the flood waters destroy all life. When I see the rainbow, when I see, God said, when I see the rainbow in the clouds, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and every living creature on earth. That's the kind of covenant-making God that we serve. Then God said to Noah, yes, this rainbow is the sign. Everyone says it's a sign. Sign of the rainbow. Yes, this rainbow is a sign of the covenant I'm confirming with all the creatures of the earth. This covenant was not just with man, but God made this covenant with all the creatures on earth. So as I close, I'm going to give you 4 things to learn from the life of Noah. Number 1, God is faithful to those who obey him. He's faithful. Noah was obedient. 100 years of obedience. That's longer than the lifetime that we have today. 100 years of obedience. Number 2, God does not always protect us or our surroundings from trouble, but God cares for us in spite of trouble. You got to get that. God is not going to always keep you from trouble. He's not going to always keep your surroundings from trouble. But God will take care of you in spite of the trouble if you are faithful and obedient to him. Number 3, obedience is a long-term commitment. Woo, Lord, sometimes we get something from the Lord. Oh, yes, God, I hear you. And we may do it for a week. Or we may do it for a month. Then we grow weary. And we let go of it. And we think we've done something. Please hear me. There are three very important aspects to the race you're running, to the race God has called us to. One is how we start. Two is how we run. Three is how we finish. Don't start a good race and not run a good race. Don't start a good race, run a good race, and not finish a good race. We've got to carry this thing all the way throughout. Obedience is a long-term commitment. The ark was 100 years in the making. And number 4, the sinful nature of man always travels with him from generation to generation. Noah stepped out of the ark onto an earth that was devoid of human life. But God gave him reassuring promises. And God made a covenant that consisted of 4 parts. The first 2 God made to himself. The last 2 he made with Noah on behalf of all of creation. Number 1, God said to himself, I will never again curse the ground because of man. Number 2, God said to himself that as long as the earth remains, the seasons will always come as expected. Number 3, God promised to Noah on behalf of creation to never again destroy the earth and all living creatures with the flood. And number 4, God promised that a rainbow will be visible in the sky as a sign to all living creatures that he will keep what he's promised. The rainbow is a sign in the clouds reminding us of the promise made by the covenant-making, covenant-keeping God to never again destroy the earth with the flood. We see it. The animals see it. But God also sees it. And it reminds him, man is evil. Man is corrupt. Always has been, always will be. But God gave us a plan. He gave us his plan to deliver us from that spirit of corruption, from that life of evil. Listen, you do not have to live a corrupt life. You do not have to live an evil life. You do not have to live a sinful life. If you're doing it because you want to. Because the most important covenant God made was a promise to send a son. One who would live a life that we could not live, and one who would die the death that we deserve to die. And his promise is to anyone who would believe in this son, that sin would you would no longer be a slave of sin, but you will become a child of God. So if you're sinning, if you're living a life of sin, it is not because you have to, it is because either you want to or you've not made Jesus Lord of your life. Right. God is a covenant-making God. And all he does is invite you to taste and see that the Lord is good. I've lived on both sides of the cross. The side before I met him, and now the side after I met him. I can tell you, living on this side, it is so much better. Oh, it is so much better. Oh, I'm not bound by sin. I'm not a slave of sin, but I'm a child of God. I don't have to live by the corruption that's in this world, and neither do you. Do not let the devil lie to you and trick you and deceive you and think you've got to be a certain way. What God spoke of, he spoke about man in general, not you in particular. So you in particular can change your lot in life.